You've spent 40 years building wealth, sacrificing, saving, making prudent decisions, but there's one threat that could unravel everything you've built, and it's the one most people refuse to face until it's already too late. Warren Buffett understood something most estate attorneys won't tell you. The greatest threat to your legacy isn't market crashes. It's not even poor investment choices. It's complexity. It's the 100-page estate plan that turns your final gift to your family into a legal labyrinth they'll navigate while grieving. When Buffett wrote his will, he did something that shocked the estate planning industry. He made it simple, radically simple. The fifth richest person in the world gave his wife instructions that fit on a single page. Put 90% in an S&P 500 index fund. Put 10% in short-term government bonds. That's it. No trusts within trusts. No complex tax optimization schemes. No portfolio that requires a team of advisors to manage. Just clarity. This is The Rational Retiree, where we explore timeless financial wisdom for people approaching or living in retirement. Before we continue, let me be clear. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't professional, financial, or legal advice. This is educational content designed to help you think more clearly about decisions that matter. You should always consult with qualified professionals before making any financial or estate planning decisions. If you find value in what we discussed today, I'd appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. These conversations matter, and your perspective enriches them for everyone. Now let's talk about something most people get catastrophically wrong. Here's the question we're exploring today. Will your final act of love for your family be a gift or a burden? Because that's what your will is, your last communication, your final instruction manual for the people you care about most. And for most people, it's a disaster waiting to happen. You have a choice. You can create an estate plan so complex that your heirs will spend years and tens of thousands of dollars untangling it while they're supposed to be mourning. Or you can follow Buffett's lead and give them something infinitely more valuable than complex optimization: clarity in their darkest hour. This isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you think about the money you're leaving behind. Warren Buffett didn't become one of the world's wealthiest investors by following conventional wisdom. He became wealthy by questioning it relentlessly. Born in 1930 in Omaha, Nebraska, Buffett filed his first tax return at age 13, deducting his bicycle as a business expense for his paper route. By 11, he'd already purchased his first stock. The man who would later be called the Oracle of Omaha built Berkshire Hathaway into a $500 billion enterprise using principles most professional investors considered too simple to work. But here's what matters for our discussion today. Buffett has spent decades thinking about what happens after he's gone, not just to his fortune, to the people he loves. In his 2013 letter to shareholders, Buffett did something unusual. He publicly disclosed the instructions in his will for his wife's inheritance. He explained exactly what he told the trustee to do: invest 90% in a very low-cost S&P 500 index fund and 10% in short-term government bonds. He didn't have to share this. The fifth richest person in the world could have kept his estate plans private. But Buffett understood something crucial. The principle behind his approach could help millions of people who would never manage billions, but would face the same fundamental question: how do you take care of people when you're no longer there to do it yourself? Buffett cared about this issue because He'd watched what complexity does to families. He'd seen brilliant people create estate plans that generated years of legal fees, family conflict, and confusion. He'd observed that the most sophisticated-sounding strategies often produced the worst outcomes for the people they were supposed to help. His conclusion was characteristically blunt. Simplicity isn't just easier. In estate planning, it's usually better. Let me share some numbers that should concern you. The average probate process in America takes between 18 and 24 months to complete. That's 2 years during which assets are frozen, legal fees accumulate, and families wait. The average cost of probate? Between 3% and 7% of the estate's total value. For $1 million estate, that's $30,000 to $70,000 in legal and administrative fees. Money that doesn't go to your heirs. Money that goes to court systems and attorneys. But here's the number that should truly alarm you. 55% of Americans die without a will at all. They let the state decide how their assets get distributed. They force their families to navigate intestacy laws during grief. And for those who do have wills, the average estate plan is 15 to 20 pages of legal language most people can't understand. It references trusts with acronyms like QIIP and ILIT and GRAT. It creates contingencies upon contingencies. Why does conventional wisdom fail so spectacularly? Because the estate planning industry has an incentive problem. Complex plans generate more fees. Ongoing trust management creates recurring revenue. Every additional layer of sophistication justifies a higher bill. I'm not suggesting attorneys are malicious. Most genuinely believe they're providing value. But the system itself pushes toward complexity even when simplicity would serve the client better. Here's what most people miss. Estate planning has become an exercise in tax optimization rather than an exercise in love. The question has shifted from how do I make this easy for my family to how do I save every possible dollar on estate taxes? For the vast majority of Americans, this is backwards. The federal estate tax exemption in 2024 is $61 million per person. For married couples, that's $22 million. If your estate is below these thresholds, and 99.8% of estates are, federal estate taxes aren't your problem. Let me say that again. If you're worth less than $61 million, federal estate taxes are not coming for you. Yet millions of people create complex estate plans designed primarily to avoid taxes they would never pay anyway. The real threat isn't the IRS. It's confusion. It's conflict. It's your children trying to interpret documents they don't understand while planning your funeral. Consider this scenario. You've set up a revocable living trust to avoid probate. Smart move. But you've also created 3 separate trusts for your children with complex distribution schedules tied to their ages and milestones. You've appointed a professional trustee your kids have never met. You've included provisions for dynasty trusts that extend across generations. On paper, it looks sophisticated. In reality, you've just guaranteed that your children will need to hire attorneys to understand what you've left them. Now consider Buffett's approach. 90% goes into an index fund that anyone can understand, and that requires no active management. 10% goes into government bonds for stability and liquidity. The entire strategy can be explained in one paragraph. Which approach is actually serving your family better? The data on family conflict tells a disturbing story. Studies suggest that roughly 70% of wealth transfers fail by the second generation. By the third generation, 90% of family wealth is gone. The primary cause isn't poor investment performance, It's family discord. It's confusion. It's siblings fighting over assets they don't understand how to manage. Complexity doesn't protect your legacy. It endangers it. To understand why Buffett's will strategy matters, you need to understand his broader investment philosophy. Buffett has always believed in what he calls the circle of competence. The idea is simple. You should only invest in things you truly understand. If you can't explain how a business makes money in simple terms, you shouldn't own it. This principle extends to estate planning. If your heirs can't understand what you've left them and how it works, you've failed them. Buffett's mentor, Benjamin Graham, taught him to seek a margin of safety in every investment. You buy assets for significantly less than they're worth to protect yourself against uncertainty. The estate planning equivalent? Build in simplicity to protect against confusion. But there's a deeper principle at work in Buffett's approach: humility about prediction. Buffett knows he's one of the greatest investors who ever lived. Yet he doesn't try to tell his heirs exactly how to invest after he's gone. He doesn't create a detailed investment policy statement they must follow. He doesn't appoint himself as financial advisor from beyond the grave. He gives them a simple index fund because he knows he can't predict the future. He can't know what the economy will look like. He can't know what his wife's needs will be. He can't know what opportunities or challenges will emerge. So instead of trying to control the future through complexity, he provides a foundation that works in almost any future. Here's how Buffett himself explained it. I believe the trust's long-term results from this policy will be superior to those attained by most investors, whether pension funds, institutions, or individuals who employ high-fee managers. Read that carefully. Buffett isn't saying his approach might work. He's saying it will likely beat what most professionals do. Why? Not because index funds are magic, because simplicity eliminates the ways investors typically destroy wealth: high fees, emotional decision-making, complexity costs, and the illusion that they can consistently beat the market. Buffett's mental model for estate planning comes down to this: your job is not to optimize for every possible scenario. Your job is to provide a robust, understandable foundation that will serve your family well in most scenarios. It's the difference between building a fortress and building a house. The fortress might protect against more theoretical threats, but the house is where people can actually live. He once said something that applies perfectly to estate planning. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. When you create an estate plan so complex that your heirs don't know what they're doing with it, you've built risk into your legacy. The paradox Buffett understood: the more you try to control from the grave, the less actual control your family will have. Let's get practical. You're not Warren Buffett. You don't have $120 billion, but the principles behind his approach apply regardless of your wealth level. Here's how to think about your will and estate plan. Start with the foundation. What do you actually want to accomplish? Most people start with tactics. Should I have a trust? What about this tax strategy? What type of account should this be in? Wrong starting point. Begin with intention. What do you want to happen after you die? Who needs to be taken care of? What would make their lives easier during an incredibly difficult time? Write these down in plain English before you talk to any attorney. I want my spouse to have enough money to maintain her lifestyle without worrying about investment decisions. I want my children to receive their inheritance in a way that doesn't create conflict between them. I want the process to be as simple as possible. These are your actual goals. Everything else is just mechanism. The Buffett approach to asset allocation for heirs Buffett's 90-10 split isn't arbitrary. It's a sophisticated approach disguised as simplicity. The 90% in an S&P 500 index fund provides growth. Over long periods, the stock market has returned about 10% annually. It requires no active management. Anyone can buy it. The fees are minimal, often less than 0.05% annually. The 10% in short-term government bonds provides stability and liquidity. If your spouse needs cash immediately, she doesn't have to sell stocks at the wrong time. She can draw from the bond allocation first. For most retirees leaving money to spouses or children, this framework makes sense. Adjust the percentages based on needs, risk tolerance, and time horizon, but keep the underlying logic. One component for growth, one component for stability, both completely understandable. If you have $500,000 to leave your spouse, that might be $450,000 in a total stock market index fund and $50,000 in a high-yield savings account or short-term treasury fund. Same principle. Zero complexity. Simplify your account structure. Here's a question. How many different financial accounts do you have? How many different institutions hold your money? For many retirees, the answer is alarming. They have IRAs at 3 different brokerages from old jobs. They have a taxable account here and another there. They have CDs at 2 different banks. They have savings accounts they forgot about. This is a nightmare for your heirs. Consolidate. Move everything you can to 1 or 2 reputable institutions. Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. Pick one and move your assets there. Keep it simple. Keep it organized. Your heirs will have to contact every single institution where you held accounts. They'll have to provide death certificates and legal documents to each one. They'll have to close accounts and transfer assets from multiple places. Every additional account is another burden during grief. Consolidate now while you can still do it yourself. Create a simple document. Your family can actually use your will as a legal document. It needs to be legally valid, but that doesn't mean it can't also be understandable. Work with your attorney to create a 1-page summary of your will in plain English. What goes where? Who gets what? Who's in charge? What are the next steps? This isn't a replacement for the legal document. It's a translation. When your family is in shock after your death, they need to understand what happens next without hiring an attorney to interpret your attorney's language. Include a separate document. Call it What to Do When I Die. That lists where your will is located, physical and digital copies, your attorney's contact information, all financial accounts with account numbers and institution contacts, insurance policies, and where to find them, safe deposit box information, digital asset information, passwords, accounts, files, funeral preferences, and arrangements already made. This document should live in a place your spouse or executor knows about. Update it annually. Clarity is a gift. The index fund test. Here's a simple test for any investment you're leaving to heirs. Can you explain it in 2 sentences? Could your spouse or children manage it without professional help if needed? If the answer is no, seriously question whether it belongs in your estate. Individual stocks? Your heirs probably shouldn't inherit them. They'll need to make sell decisions without understanding the companies. Actively managed funds? Unnecessary fees and complexity? Alternative investments? Real estate partnerships? Private equity? Hedge funds? Unless your heirs are sophisticated investors, these create problems, not solutions. Annuities? Often confusing and expensive. If you have them, Make sure your family understands what they are and whether they should keep them. The Buffett principle. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself, and your heirs certainly won't. Protect against family conflict. Money brings out the worst in people during grief. Even families that get along beautifully can fracture over inheritance. Here's Buffett's implicit solution. Make the distributions as equal and as clear as possible. If you're leaving money to multiple children, divide it equally unless you have a compelling reason not to. If you do treat children differently, explain your reasoning in a letter they can read. Don't leave them guessing why you loved one of them less. If you're giving specific items rather than cash, jewelry, artwork, family heirlooms, document your wishes clearly. Better yet, have those conversations while you're alive. Let your daughter choose which pieces of jewelry she wants. Let your son pick which tools or books matter to him. The fights happen when expectations don't match reality. Eliminate the surprises. Choose the right executor. Your executor has to deal with the legal and administrative burden of your death. Choose someone who is organized and responsible, emotionally stable enough to handle this during grief. Willing to actually do it, ask them first. Capable of basic financial management. Trusted by other family members. This doesn't have to be your oldest child. It doesn't have to be your spouse if they're not equipped for it. It should be whoever is actually best suited for the role. And pay them. Executors are legally entitled to reasonable compensation. If you want your executor to be professional and thorough, compensate them appropriately in your will. Review and update regularly. Buffett's will strategy works partly because it's simple enough that updates are easy. Complex estate plans often don't get updated because it's expensive and complicated to do so. Review your will and estate plan every 3 to 5 years or whenever major life changes occur, marriage or divorce, birth of children or grandchildren, death of a beneficiary or executor, major changes in assets, moves to different states, changes in tax law. Your estate plan from 1995 is almost certainly outdated and potentially problematic. If you haven't reviewed yours in 5 years, schedule a review now. Consider what you don't need. The most powerful estate planning tool might be elimination. Do you really need a trust? Many people who have trusts don't actually need them. If your estate is below the federal exemption amount and you're leaving everything to your spouse or adult children, a simple will might be sufficient. Do you need life insurance? If your children are grown and your spouse has enough assets to live on, you might not. Do you need complex tax strategies? Again, if you're below exemption amounts, probably not. The attorney's job is to offer options. Your job is to choose the simplest option that accomplishes your actual goals. Don't buy complexity you don't need just because it was offered. Uncomfortable conversations. This is where Buffett's philosophy becomes deeply human. Let's talk about something harder. Death is coming. For you, for your spouse, for people you love. Planning for death isn't morbid. Avoiding planning for death is morbid. It's forcing the people you love to guess what you wanted while they're drowning in grief. There's a conversation you need to have with your spouse. Today. Not next month. Today. You need to sit down together and discuss what happens when one of you dies. Where is the will? Where are the accounts? What bills get paid automatically? What insurance policies exist? What are the passwords to essential accounts? Most couples avoid this conversation It feels uncomfortable. It forces you to imagine life without the person sitting across from you. Do it anyway. Here's the script. I love you, and because I love you, I want to make sure you're not left confused and overwhelmed if something happens to me. Let's spend an hour going through everything you'd need to know. That conversation is an act of love. It's one of the most loving things you can do for your spouse. You also need to have a conversation with your children if they're adults. Not about how much they're inheriting. That's often inappropriate and can create problems. But about your wishes, about what matters to you, about what they should know. Tell them where your documents are. Tell them who your attorney is. Tell them who the executor will be and why you chose that person. Tell them your funeral preferences. Give them permission to ask questions. This isn't about being fair or unfair in distributions. It's about being clear. One of the cruelest things you can do to your children is leave them guessing what you would have wanted. Make a video if writing is hard. Record your voice explaining your wishes, but give them something beyond legal documents. Here's what most people avoid: talking about diminished capacity. What happens if you develop dementia? Who makes decisions then? Have you executed a durable power of attorney? Does that person know they have this responsibility? What about medical decisions? Do you have a healthcare power of attorney? Have you communicated your wishes about end-of-life care? These conversations are excruciating. Have them anyway. Buffett's approach to estate planning is ultimately about this: taking responsibility for the mess your death will create, because it will create a mess. Death always does. But you can choose whether it's a manageable mess or a catastrophic one. The people who love you deserve better than to be left figuring everything out while they're grieving. Don't do that to them. Here's what you need to do: concrete actions, no more theory. Immediate actions. This month, locate your will. If you can't find it in the next 60 seconds, that's a problem. Get a copy from your attorney or create a new will if you've lost it. Create a "What to Do When I Die" document. List every financial account, insurance policy, and important contact. Update it twice a year. Consolidate financial accounts. Start the process of moving money from multiple institutions to one or two primary institutions. Have the conversation with your spouse about what happens when one of you dies. Schedule it on your calendar if you need to. Review beneficiary designations on retirement accounts and life insurance. These override your will. Make sure they're current. Within 3 months, if you don't have a will, make one. Use an attorney. Yes, there are online services, but wills are too important to cheap out on. If your will is more than 5 years old, schedule a review with an attorney. Simplify your investment holdings. If you own individual stocks or complex funds, consider whether your heirs could manage them. Create or update your durable power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. Write a letter to your heirs explaining your wishes and the reasoning behind your decisions. Keep it with your will. Within 6 months, review and potentially simplify your estate plan. Can you eliminate trusts you don't need? Can you make the structure clearer? Have the conversation with your adult children about where documents are located and what your wishes are. If you have more than $1 million in assets, consult with both an estate attorney and a tax professional to ensure your plan is appropriate. Consider whether your current executor is still the right choice. If not, update your will. Organize all important documents in one location and tell your spouse and executor where to find them. If you're over 70, review your will annually, not every 3 to 5 years. Things change faster as you age. Make sure someone besides you knows your account passwords or has access to your password manager. Consider prepaying funeral expenses so your family doesn't have to make those decisions under pressure. If you own real estate beyond your primary home, decide whether your heirs should inherit it or whether you should simplify. Talk to your children honestly about your health and any cognitive decline you're experiencing. Give them permission to step in if needed. If your estate is below $13 million, stop worrying about federal estate taxes. You're optimizing for a problem you don't have. Focus instead on simplicity and clarity. Those are your real challenges. Question every complex strategy your attorney suggests. Ask, does this make my family's life easier or harder? If your estate is above $13 million, you do need sophisticated estate planning. Tax efficiency matters for you, but even with sophisticated planning, create simple explanations of what you've set up and why. Consider whether your complexity actually serves your values or just saves money that your heirs don't desperately need. Let's zoom out for a moment. Warren Buffett could afford the most complex, optimized estate plan ever created. Teams of attorneys would line up to design elaborate strategies for him. He chose simplicity instead. Why? Because he understands something fundamental about being human. We can't control the future. We can't anticipate every scenario. We can't optimize for every possibility. What we can do is provide clarity, foundation, a stable base from which the people we love can make their own decisions. Your estate plan is not really about money. It's about the last message you send to the people you love. What does that message say? Does it say, I trust you to make good decisions with simple tools? Or does it say, I don't trust you, so I'm controlling you from the grave with complexity? Does it say, I made this as easy as possible for you? Or does it say, figure this out yourself while you're grieving? The money itself matters less than you think. A spouse with $500,000 invested simply will likely be happier and more secure than a spouse with $700,000 tied up in complex structures they don't understand. Security isn't about having the most money. It's about understanding what you have and knowing you can manage it. Here's the existential truth. You're going to die. Everyone you love is going to die. This is not a problem to be solved. It's a reality to be accepted. But within that reality, you have choices. You can make death slightly less terrible for the people you leave behind, or you can make it worse. That's the choice. That's the only choice you actually have. Buffett's will strategy isn't really about index funds. It's about facing mortality with clarity and giving the people you love a gift they can actually use. Most people die having never really confronted their own mortality. They half plan. They create complicated structures to avoid thinking about the simple fact that they'll be gone. Don't be most people. Face it. Plan for it. Make it as simple as possible. Then live your life knowing you've taken care of it. There's enormous peace in that. In knowing that when you die, and you will die, you haven't left a disaster behind. You've left clarity, instructions, love in the form of organization. That's what Buffett's approach really offers. The peace of knowing you've been responsible about the one thing you can't ultimately control. Warren Buffett once wrote something that should guide how we think about estate planning. Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Your estate plan Is you planting a tree for people to sit under after you're gone. Plant a strong tree. Plant a simple tree. Plant a tree that doesn't require a team of arborists to understand. The greatest gift you can give your family isn't a tax-optimized strategy that saves 2% in fees. It's clarity in their darkest hour. It's knowing exactly what you wanted and how to execute it. It's not having to guess what Dad would have wanted or how Mom wanted her assets distributed. Preparation is an act of love. It's saying, I know this will be hard enough without me making it harder. Buffett's philosophy on wealth can be distilled to this: money is a tool to buy independence and to take care of people you care about. His will strategy reflects that perfectly. He's buying his wife independence from complex financial decisions. He's taking care of her in the simplest, clearest way possible. You can do the same. You don't need billions. You just need to be honest about what matters and ruthless about cutting what doesn't. Your job isn't to eliminate death. It's to prepare for it so thoroughly that it doesn't eliminate everything else you value. It doesn't destroy your family relationships. It doesn't consume your legacy in legal fees and confusion. You have more control than you think, not over when you die, not over most of what happens after, but over how clear you make things, over how simple you make the process, over what message you leave behind. Don't waste that control. If you're watching this and you haven't updated your will in 5 years, do it this month. If you haven't had the conversation with your spouse about what happens when one of you dies, have it this week. If you haven't told your children where your important documents are, tell them today, not next month. Not when you get around to it. Now. Because here's the truth. You don't know how much time you have. Nobody does. The only time you definitely have to take care of this is right now. Warren Buffett understood that the purpose of wealth isn't to have the biggest number when you die. It's to take care of people, to create security, to solve problems rather than create them. Simple beats complex, clear beats clever, understandable beats optimized. That's not just investment advice. That's life advice. That's death advice. Take it. If this resonated with you, I'd appreciate if you'd subscribe to The Rational Retiree. Leave a comment sharing your experience with estate planning, what you've learned, what you're struggling with, what you've seen go right or wrong. These conversations matter. Your perspective helps others navigate these waters. Until next time, remember, clarity is a gift. Give it to the people you love. Don't be most people.